So in today's Player Corner, we're going to be talking about sort of the process of game production. And we'll be looking at a few different publishers, some of the big names, and just comparing the kinds of games you get from them and kind of the effect it has on the game market, sort of how much a game costs and how easy they are to come by. So to begin with, I think we should cover the big ones. There are games that come out in the sort of mainstream market. These games are released to Toys R Us, to KB Toys, Walmart, Target.
Right.
Barnes & Noble actually has a pretty good selection.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably Barnes & Noble might have the best one, actually. But this is rare. Not many games go to the big outlet stores.
Right. But at the same time, the games that do go to those outlet stores tend to be the games that people will think of and remember when they think of board games. If they're not initiated into the scene that into a lot of the games that we see and we play. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of place where you'd find, if I can make this reference again, Don't Wake Daddy, games like that. If you go to an outlet store like that, you'll find a lot of games that are marketed toward a much larger audience.
Mm-hmm. And younger.
As well.
Don't Wake Daddy. But so typically you'll see the sort of Parker Brothers games in there, and you'll see, and which is I think is a subsidiary of Hasbro now too, but you'll mostly see like Hasbro products in the big stores. And the branch that we're most interested in as sort of gaming hobbyists and gaming enthusiasts is their Avalon Hill division. They've come out with some really cool stuff in the past. The Star Wars Queen's Gambit game is a big one. The Risk 2210 is pretty popular. Betrayal at House on the Hill. These are all Avalon Hill titles that have gotten a fair amount of buzz within the hardcore gaming community. And with Nexus Ops, I haven't actually had a chance to play it, but I've heard a lot of good things. Anyway, but those games are very rare, and unfortunately, as a side effect of them going to the big retail stores, they often don't sell well. And so you have games like that are good games that hold up well compared to other similar titles by more enthusiast aimed gaming.
Right.
And but they don't sell well because they're in too large a market. They're in too large an audience, and people don't really know what they're getting into. They don't know what they're looking for there. And so as a consequence, they won't sell typically as well, and they'll usually be marked way down at the end of their run. I know Star Wars Epic Duels, one of my personal favorite games, was marked down to like $5 at the end of its run because it wasn't selling. And but then what tends to happen a lot especially with Avalon Hill games, is there'll be kind of a resurgence. So with those titles, you'll see them go up to maybe $50, $75, $100, a couple years later, because now people realize what quality games they are. They sort of get a good reputation on Board Game Geek, and they generate a really big cult following.
Right.
And so that's why you can't, until Avalon Hill was reprinted, it was over $100 on eBay. You just could not get it. It ran into this weird sort of rarity for these games.
Right. I ran into this problem myself recently. It was a game I was trying to purchase, Wise and Otherwise, we have it in the background here. Mm-hmm. That I was trying to get this myself, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I just went around to a bunch of different places online that sold games and couldn't find a single copy. And so I guess I think a lot of the problem too might just be that it's more difficult to reprint games than it is to reprint old. You see a lot of old movies come into reprint all the time, and a lot of books come into reprint all the time. But just a little bit, I think it's a little bit different to reprint games. Yeah.
With movies and things, it's more about I think royalties. With games, right. It's that, but it's also components.
Yeah, because you need special machines to make the special parts. It's not just you can use the same burning mechanism to burn thousands of copies of Pirate's Cove, say.
Right, and then people always ask, well, why don't these games see a reprint? Why doesn't Epic Duels get reprinted? Why doesn't Avalon Hill redo Betrayal? And that's very rare because they actually did redo Betrayal. But people will say, why hasn't this happened sooner? Why won't they, make another reprint Nexus Ops? They already have all the components, the mold's all done. Why don't they remake it? And the answer I think is that they did not sell well the first time. So a big company like Hasbro would have no impetus to do that. You see these petitions, but they're relatively small. These games are still niche, and they're just. I wish that we could get it so that they weren't being mismarketed, so that the mass market could sort of get into gaming in the way we have, and the way our viewers, I'm sure, are. But it's just that's not the case now. And so, so that's sort of the big company and sort of the mainstream games, and then the big name in hobby games would probably be Fantasy Flight. They're probably the biggest dog there.
Right, and a lot of the games that we see and we play most frequently, or maybe not most frequently, but we see a lot of our Fantasy Flight games. They tend to get a lot of specialty licensed games. Maybe not a lot, but I know the Battlestar Galactica board game is a Fantasy Flight game.
Yeah, and they get the War Machine universe. They have the Death Angel card game. So they have like a partnership with Privateer Press, I think, who does those. So yeah, they do more licensed games, but they generally have very high quality components because they have a huge art department. They have a very big, they're just a very big force in the market. And then the last type, besides the big hobby games and the big mainstream games, would be the independent publishers. We talked a few weeks ago about Summoner Wars, the game by Colby Dowk, and that's we've really enjoyed that game. And he just sort of decided that he couldn't get it published by Hasbro or Fantasy Flight, and so he thought, well, I'll just do it myself. I want it done right. And so the independent games tend to be, there are some really great independent games out there.
For sure.
Yomi, another one. These games, we've really enjoyed them. They're some of our favorites because they are set up they're done directly by the designers.
Right.
So there's a level of control that they have that you lose by going to a publisher.
Right. But necessarily, it also makes it more difficult to draw, maybe not to draw parallels between them, but to compare them or to derive patterns. Mm-hmm. It's similar. It's similar in a lot of ways to indie music. Like, if the reason, like a lot of mainstream music and music produced by big companies they have very similar structure or theming or kind of a sound to it. Mm-hmm. And with indie music, just like indie games, you have such editorial control from the creator, and you have it definitely goes in the direction that the creator wants it to go with an indie game, and that could be for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah, you don't have it sort of a team as big a team
right.
necessary to look at things and work on balance. And,
but at the same time, there's nobody at the top telling you can't do the things you want to do either.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think that's basically an overview of. The last thing you see, I guess the fourth category would be Euro games that are published by different companies in Europe, in Germany and France particularly, that then get distributors here. So a lot of times you'll see Rio Grande branded games, and those are games that were published by some company overseas, and then they're sort of localized by Rio Grande. Rio Grande works on converting them and making sure the rules translate well into English, and often, interestingly enough, changing the theming. For instance, you may have heard of the game Keltis. Keltis is sort of a 4-player version of Lost Cities, a 2-player dueling card game by Reiner Knizia, and that game was he sort of made a 4-player variant which revolved around it was like these little green stones. It's a very thinly themed game, but a very fun one. And when they released it here, they changed it to Lost Cities, the board game, to sort of play off of the success of Lost Cities and to sort of make the theming a little more full. So sometimes you even have that change. I can't think of all the ones that have been changed. Poison, for instance. Poison has been converted into like a bakery themed game for kids.
Really?
It's very odd.
It's not Poison. I had no idea.
There are several versions. Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, you have a lot of those
poison.
games. Mm-hmm.
What's the poison in bakery poison? Salt.
I'm not sure actually, but so you have a lot of different games. The games that kind of see different iterations across the world. But yeah, so I think that's a pretty good overview of the different kind of publishers you'll see and different ways that games get produced, and the reason different games cost what they do. If they're out of print or if they're made by a bigger company or a smaller one. So I think that wraps up today's Player Corner.
Yeah. Join us next section. We're going to give you a tutorial of BattleCon.
Mm-hmm.